Hey guys, welcome into episode 5 of Unsportsmanlike Hangouts. This is the Unsportsmanlike content crew: Zach Deal, What's the Deal Sports, Nick D'Amelio, Sean Redden, and special guest for episode 5, Turron Davenport. How you doing, Turron?
Hey, what's going on? I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you taking out time to come join us today. Turron, just to start off a little bit, when you first got into sports journalism, where'd you kind of start off at? Was there any early influences or anything that moved you in that direction? Or
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'll tell you exactly what moved me in that direction. When I saw Bleacher Report sell to Time Warner for all that money, I mean, Turner Network, whatever it was, I said, if those guys could do it, I could do it also. And it pretty much just started from there. I never had any true plans of doing journalism. I was an athlete growing up, and I always wanted to play pro football, and it didn't happen. But things happen for a reason, and I enjoy what I'm doing now.
you said you were an athlete growing up. What position did you play?
I played wide receiver. Yeah, I played. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I played ball, and then I went to Delaware State University, transferred to Cheney University, and then once I was done there, I had some opportunities to work out for the Canadian League, Hamilton and Saskatchewan. Those didn't work out. I worked out for the New Jersey Arena team, and then as well as the New York Dragons. And, it just didn't take its course the way I hoped it would. And, I mean, I can't say I didn't try, and that's pretty much, where it is now.
Awesome, yeah. Obviously, you're part of ESPN now with the Titans beat. But before that, you were with the Eagles. What was the experience like being able to cover? I don't want to put words in your mouth in case you didn't grow up an Eagles fan, but I'm assuming being able to cover your hometown team.
Yeah, I didn't grow up an Eagles fan. I grew up a 49ers fan. And, I always loved John Taylor. That's actually why I went to Delaware State, to be honest with you. But covering the Eagles was awesome just because I got to launch a site for USA Today, the Eagles Wire. And we grew that. And that just became one of the very respected sources of Eagles information while I was there, and they're still doing a good job. And it was just great just to be able to interact with the guys. One of the things I've been able to use to my advantage is knowing the game, right? And knowing it at the level that the players do, and being able to discuss coverages and breakdowns and all that kind of stuff. And they enjoy that. So the conversations with them would tend to be different. And that was really cool. I developed a very close relationship with Nelson Aguilar, Malcolm Jenkins as well. It was a great experience, man. That 17 year, I got to do a book on Carson Wentz, and we did the book in 2 weeks. And it was a crazy experience, but I mean, it's one that helped me grow, and it's actually helped me become a lot more confident as a journalist. And that Eagles experience was the best, man. I there's no beating that, that Super Bowl year.
Awesome, yeah. Was it hard to obviously when you got the opportunity to move on to ESPN, was it hard to kind of leave home, someplace you've always been, and take on a new challenge? Was there any hesitation at all?
Yeah, it was actually very difficult. I didn't have any hesitation because, I mean, working for ESPN like that, in my opinion, is the pinnacle, right? So I didn't have any hesitation. I knew I had to just, put my head down and just keep working. It was crazy because I had never been here in Nashville. I got the job. I interviewed on June 15th. I'll never forget it, man. I got an email in May, and they told me, they were interested, and we went through the interview process, and then they sent me an email to come up with a plane ticket and everything, hotel reserved, and I flew up to Bristol and interviewed. And at that point, I was like, man, this is really something that could happen. And knowing that, there wasn't any hesitation. I moved here July 29th, 2018, went to work July 30th, and just hit the ground running and just, made it happen, man. And now, it's a really good situation.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, as an Eagles fan, I always loved reading your articles about the team. I thought you were one of the best writers on the beat.
Thank you.
Me and Nick actually got the opportunity. You probably have no idea, remember this, but we got to sit next to you at the first ever Carson Wentz charity softball game. We were actually in the press box next to you, and
Yeah.
I was actually trying to see your process on how you went about everything, and it was tough for the fans, obviously losing you on the beat, but I was also super happy for you because, to be honest, I mean, you're too fresh to be just a writer. The bow ties and the outfits have to
100%,
be on
100%.
TV.
Second that.
I appreciate you guys, man. Yeah, that was a fun time doing that Carson Wentz thing. I'm a family guy, so it was cool that I had my middle daughter with me, and it was funny because I had her down on the field with me beforehand, and she was actually the camera operator. She recorded my interview with Carson Wentz.
Wow.
And at the end of it, he was like, "Hey, TD, man, thanks a lot for doing this, brother." And my daughter just looked at me like, "He actually knows you." But that was a great experience, man. I'm glad you brought that up, man. It made me smile.
That was a fun time. Sean and I, we enjoyed doing it. It's unfortunate that looks like it's obviously going to be postponed this year, but it's definitely just it's fun for everyone involved, all the people that go, and just sit in the press box for that, especially for a great cause like that. It was a real good time. But
not expecting Elliott to hit homers too. Just bombs.
Jake Elliott, man.
Jake Elliott.
And Wisniewski was jacking, man.
Well, he's packing a punch though, Wisniewski. You already know bringing something to the plate, but Jake Elliott just with that Ichiro kind of swing, he's almost running out of the batter's box, and then he's still hitting him over the fence. So that was awesome to watch. Richard Rodgers too. His dad being batting coach in college, he was ripping them last year when we went. So that was also another great experience. But Turron, you said you had dreams of just being at ESPN your entire career. I am somebody that grew up with those same dreams. I had an internship at 97.3 ESPN during the Super Bowl run, and Sal Palantonio, I used to listen to him every single day say that the Eagles were going to still win the Super Bowl after the Carson Wentz injury. So I had the same aspirations. Is there anybody that you specifically looked up to at ESPN growing up?
Stuart Scott, definitely. He's someone, because I just love the way he would just be natural when he was on the air. It wasn't robotic. It was authentic, and he had no problem with bringing the way we speak every day to the broadcast. So he's somebody. A funny one, I always liked Charlie Steiner. I don't know what it was about him, but I always loved him. And that one where they're cracking up, I don't know if you remember that. This is from the 90s. They were cracking. I forget what they were laughing at, but he just could not stop laughing. So he was somebody else. And, Sal Powell definitely. And I actually call him Uncle Sal, and it's like every time I see him, I say thank you, because he played a key role in me being able to get this position. So I'm always going to mention him when you talk about guys at ESPN. But there are guys outside of ESPN too, man. And it's just, when you find people that you can latch on to and just absorb like a sponge, you have to do that. And it's really truthful when they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So you always have to be on your A game. You always have to put the best foot forward.
100%. 100%. It's a great answer.
Absolutely. Now, getting into football, obviously. Titans now, that's who you cover now for ESPN. How did you think they fared in the draft?
That's a good question, because I tell you, if you asked me that after the first round, I would have said, I'm not so sure what they're doing. I think Isaiah Wilson was an excellent pick. However, it wasn't Isaiah Wilson. It was just a position. I felt like as if with Logan Ryan moving on and them not having any true number 3 option at that time, they had to take a corner. And Jeff Gladney was sitting on the board. I, for the life of me, didn't understand why they didn't pick him. I thought he was going to be the guy, to be honest with you. But they went ahead. They got Wilson. They made up for it in the second round by getting Christian Fulton, who I think is an absolute steal. He's one of the best press guys in this class. Obviously Okuda and Henderson, they're a bit elevated above everyone else, but Christian Fulton is right there. So to get him at 61 was great. I love what they did in getting Darrington Evans. He complements Derrick Henry very well. You still, when you take Henry off the field, you still have a guy that can hit a home run for you, and you need that. And then in addition to that, he's ready to play. They did a lot of things that the Titans do at Appalachian State. He's really good at catching the ball out of the backfield. He's exciting in the screen game. And he's someone else that is able to, come in and give you help in pass pro. So that was a good option. And then Darrell Murchison, that was a pick that I was just I wasn't sure about. But after watching him and taking a bit of a deeper dive, you see he has the versatility. So I think they did well with that. I'm not exactly on board with the quarterback that they got, Cole McDonald. That there's a lot of development to be there, but they came back later in the 7th round. They got Chris Jackson, the DB out of Marshall, who played a lot of nickel. So I think overall, long story short, I think they did a solid job. It may not have an instant impact, especially with the COVID situation, but it's going to help in the long term.
Absolutely.
100%.
Turron, you brought up Derrick Henry, and I'm really glad you did. We saw Ryan Tannehill get the nice contract extension this year from Tennessee, but Derrick Henry, didn't get the extension that many thought that he was going to get. What's the feeling down there in Tennessee, and what's your personal feeling on how they handled those two in free agency?
Yeah, well, I think in this situation, you gotta make sure both of those guys are back, and that's what they did. They went and secured Tannehill, got that out of the way. I think that's something that they had to do. But, you have this whole notion that you don't pay the running back, and I don't necessarily agree with that just across the board. But I think especially in this situation. So what they did was they franchised him. They have every intention of signing him to a longer-term deal. That's something that they're working on doing, and they're going to get that done, in my opinion, before July 15th. So definitely look for that to happen, but it's just a matter of getting those terms right. As Jimmy Sexton is Henry's agent, and he's a major player, so he's going to want to make sure that he could say, well, you know what, my guy won the rushing title, and I turned that into this as the best part of a contract for a running back ever. So what I'm saying is he's going to have more average millions per year, more guaranteed money. Something is going to have to be more than any running back ever got. And I think that's what they're trying to tweak and figure out how they're going to get to an agreement of.
Yeah, the Derrick Henry situation is very interesting. It's kind of reminiscent more so of like Dallas Cowboys situation where they had to eventually pay Zeke because he's so important to the offense, and really without him, they're still a pretty good team, but they just can't get over the hump because they just don't have that consistency as an offense and can't run their true identity. But Turron, what are those Tennessee Titans practices like with the type of intensity and vibe that Mike Vrabel brings, like holding bags as the head coach, practically like a scout team player out there? What's that like?
Yeah, they're awesome. And that's something, the first time I just really started liking a whole coaching staff was when I covered the Eagles. I mean, I had covered the Ravens before, I covered the 49ers before, but one of the things I always liked about the Eagles staff was that they were always involved. But you look at the Titans, they've taken it to a whole different level. And I think it does start with Vrabel, and you look at the way he actually will get into the drills and execute them with him. He and Derrick Henry had a routine. They would have the Henry with stiff arm. They would have a helmet on a stick, and Henry would just keep stiff arming it, and Vrabel would be the one poking at him with it. So they just would do all kinds of things, and that's something that stood out. And it goes beyond just Coach Vrabel, Coach McKenzie, who's now the LB coach for the Lions. He would actually become a practice like a tackling dummy. They would literally tackle him in practice. Now, there's a dude that played LB for the Patriots and for the Bucks, and just everybody on that staff would dive into the drills. And that's something that I really like. And it was intense, but it was efficient too, because they made it a point to have drills that were transferred directly to game day. And you saw a lot of those things transferred to game day. So it was kind of doubly satisfying to see, players' practice time being utilized effectively and actually coming in and having an impact on game day.
Yeah, that just goes a lot deeper than like the physicality of it as well. Just having your players buy in like that, seeing their coach willing to put his body out there in front of grown professional athletes, that has to go a lot deeper. And it's almost like to the effect, I'm a LeBron James guy, not going to bring this up. It's a conversation for another day. But during the last dance, during the documentary, Michael Jordan said that he never asked his teammates to do something that he didn't do. So it's kind of like that type of effect where Mike Vrabel is completely bought into the system, and his players, you saw how far it got him last year.
Can I add something else? Dean Pease, their defensive coordinator. Now, this guy, he just retired this past year. He coached for 47 years. So we're talking about a guy that's he's got to be 70 years old at least, right? He, in the dead of summer training camp, he was doing not calisthenics, but conditioning with these guys. I'm talking about running sideline to sideline. Now, he wasn't keeping up with them, but just the fact that he was out there doing it. And it always would make me laugh because he looked like a penguin running back and forth. But he did it, man. I give him credit for it.
Yeah, he's been around defensive intensity forever. He used to be the Ravens defensive coordinator, so he's all around those jacked up guys. Those guys bring intensity. He's had the pleasure of coaching some of the best defensive players of all time. So he's just trying to live vicariously through them, and sometimes he's got to get the old legs cooking too. So.
But as you brought up, the Titans had a tremendous amount of success. Probably to most people out there, very surprising with how far they went, with Tannehill kind of taking the next step in his career in a new situation, Derrick Henry leading the league in rushing. Do you think there's like almost too much pressure going to be placed on this team next year, knowing they were a game away from the Super Bowl and have a lot of guys coming back? Do you think there's going to be kind of unfair expectations?
No. And honestly, I think as an athlete, pressure is something that it's what you make of it, right? And if you're only concerned about what's going on inside your building and being the best that you could be, there isn't any issue with pressure. You know, you have to go out there and perform regardless. So in my opinion, why not go out there and have fun? You know, and that's really the main thing. If you go out there, have fun, and be successful, everything's going to be fine. So I don't think there's a lot of pressure on them. I think, in fact, they know that they need to go out there and you know, their goal is to win the Super Bowl, and they know that anything short of that is short of the goal, right? And that it should be like that for everyone, from the Jaguars, who we know won't make it, to the Eagles, who have a pretty good shot of making it. So I think regardless, the pressure that you get is what you put on yourself and how you interpret it. So I don't think that they'll feel any pressure. They know that they just got to go out there, do the work, and make things happen. And I think they have a good shot at doing it. I'm not so sure. You know, when you look at the Ravens and what they did, and the Chiefs, what they continue to be, I mean, it's going to be tough for them.
Absolutely.
So a lot of teams added a lot to the offseason. The Ravens getting Calais Campbell for a 5th-round pick was just absurd. But, Turron, I hate to do this to you, but I got to put you on the spot right now. My favorite position growing up, running back. Derrick Henry is quite the running back for the Tennessee Titans, but Tennessee Titans actually have a really good history of running backs in their short-term history of just being Tennessee, not including the Oilers as well. How close is Derrick Henry to being the greatest running back in Tennessee Titans history?
Oh, I think he still has a lot to do to get that.
Eddie George, Chris Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie George, man, that's a Philly guy too. You know what I mean? So I'm always going to lean towards him, man. You know what I mean? Over others. And I think what he did for that period of time, he was the Titans. You know what I mean? And obviously McNair too, but I don't think 2 good seasons is enough to put him above Eddie George. But even Chris Johnson and what he did for that stretch, I don't think you could do that yet either. You give him 2 or 3 more seasons of 1,200 to 1,500 yards, okay, now you have an argument. But I don't think you have that right now.
Agree with
Yeah, I
that
definitely get
100%.
that. Chris Johnson was a monster. And so was Eddie George, obviously, in his own right. A guy who kind of seems like this is turning into a make or break season for a guy that I actually really liked coming out of college. Thought it was a little bit of a reach when the Titans took him.
I know who you're going.
Corey Davis obviously got his option declined. What do you think the situation is going to play out for him this season?
I tell you what, I don't know what it is about Philly guys. You know what I mean? But there's just this infatuation with Corey Davis, man.
We all want it.
I tell you what, I get it. Funny story. This past year, I went up to Corey in the locker room, and I said, "Hey, man, you're the most talented receiver in this division." And he looked at me, and I was like, "Yeah." Now, I'm not saying the production from the talent, but if you go on talent alone, I don't think there's a receiver with more talent than you. And he was like, "Yo, facts." Of course he's going to say facts. But it's just when you look at his ability, and especially like being able to see it firsthand, what he does in practice. You look at training camp last year, you couldn't tell me through training camp, you couldn't tell me he wasn't going to be 1,000-yard receiver, but the problem is consistency. And that's a big time issue for him is finding a way to be consistent. And I talked to him about it a lot, just that demanding the football, right? And finding that balance to where you're demanding it, but you're not being a jerk. And that's his thing. He always says he doesn't want to be a jerk. So I told him, I said, listen, they're against the Chicago Bears. T.O. set the record. Now, Brandon Marshall went on to break it, but he set the record for receptions in the game. They also won the game, but throughout the game, you know who was on the other side of the bench throwing a fit? Jerry Rice. I said, you think Jerry Rice is a jerk? He said, no, not at all. I said, see? You have to demand the football, man. And I think that's the thing. He doesn't demand it and just that's a shortcoming for him. And I think that goes into the inconsistency. But you watch that game 2 years ago against the Patriots. Hey, if I ask you who the top corner cover guy right now, you're going to say Stephon Gilmore. Well, I'm going to tell you this much. He ate Stephon Gilmore alive. Do you hear me? I'm not talking about he ate him alive. 7 for $147, I think it was, and a touchdown. And it happened right from the third play of the game, deep over route from the slot position. So he has talent. It's just a matter of getting in the right situation that's going to maximize it. So for me, it's good that he didn't get that 5th-year option picked up. I think he does need to move on. He would be awesome in an Eagles uniform. Going home to the Bears would be good for him. There are different situations that will really work for him, but I just don't think it's here in Nashville.
Does A.J. Brown command the rock? We saw him get 1,100 yards this season as a rookie. Does he kind of command the rock, and that's how he gets his production? Or
you daggone right, he commands the rock. But it's beyond just saying, give me that ball with A.J. Brown. Listen, Ryan Tannehill averaged 9.6 yards per attempt, per completion this past year. 12.3 yards per completion to A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, 20.2 yards per reception, meaning he was the number 2 yards per catch receiver this past year. No one gained more yards per catch than him with 9. How many times did you see them go play action? He runs that slant and the dude bounces off of a tackle, or he just, changes direction and accelerates away.
Falcons game was ridiculous.
Oh, that Falcons game for sure. Even the dude's first game as a pro. You look at the Browns game and what he did in that game. You just saw it happen consistently. That dude is a different creature when he touches the football. And I'll give you a hot take. There's not a receiver better than him in this league after the catch, in my opinion.
Who would you consider him to? He kind of gives me like a little bit faster, long speed Anquan Boldin type vibe, in my opinion.
I could see the Anquan Boldin ties. I could definitely see that. I think he's a better hands catcher, Des Bryant type as well. Just that combination of speed and power, right? But his catching ability is really good, and that's what helps it. If you look at it, watch him on the slants or different times. he's so confident in his catching ability, he accelerates through the ball. And this is a testament to Ryan Tannehill, too, because Tannehill leads him well. He accelerates through that catch and pulls away rather than a lot of the guys you see. Michael Irvin's a good example. He would always slow down and catch it, between the 8 and the 8, and that wouldn't allow him to get yards after the catch.
That's a great point about different paces of throwing the football, because that's like an underrated thing about football is different receivers have different speeds, so you kind of got to slow down the ball, and that was something that they talked about Tua Tagovailoa going through a lot at Alabama, especially being left-handed as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, moving on from guys like Corey Davis, and then obviously A.J. Brown stepped up for the Titans last year and was a huge reason why they had as much success as they did. A guy this year that they're going to be looking to take on a bigger role is Jonnu Smith. I'm not saying Jonnu Smith can't get it done. I actually think he's supremely talented. But do you think there's going to be a big loss losing a guy like Delanie Walker out of that locker room?
No. Well, from a leadership perspective, yes. And especially for Jonnu, there's a transition. And I wrote about this last week. He has to make that transition from being the understudy or the Robin to a Batman. He has to become Batman. And I think, he's very capable of doing that. He's another guy you talk about yards after the catch. And that's almost consistent with this receiving core. All of them are really good at that. But Jonnu, he has plenty of ability. He runs really good routes. He's a guy that you see him getting more and more confident. I remember when I first got there, he wasn't confident catching the football at all. But he would spend countless times after practice on the jugs machine and just working on different things. And he's become a very reliable pass catcher. I think he's definitely capable. He's one of Ryan Tannehill's favorite targets. In fact, he and Tannehill work out 2 or 3 times a week down there in South Florida. They just so happen, quotation marks, to be in the same area, during the quarantine, and they're taking advantage of that. So I would expect a big year for Jonnu Smith. But, when you say big year for Jonnu Smith, it's different than saying big year for George Kittle, right? So I'm not saying 90 catches. I'm saying, 50 to 60 catches, a good 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think that's solid for a tight end, especially in what the Titans offense does, and how they execute. But he's become a red zone threat too. You saw it in the Ravens game, but there were other games too where he stepped up.
For sure. And Delanie Walker, it took him a while to get into his role as well, who was mentoring him in a way. So he was wearing number 48 on the San Francisco 2012 Super Bowl team and everything as a third tight end behind
returning kicks.
There you go. So maybe Jonnu Smith can do the same thing, look at his mentor, and kind of just replicate the same thing as him.
Yeah, I think it's a good situation for him. And I tell you another thing, the offensive coordinator absolutely loves him. It's funny. I did, when I first got there, actually before the Eagles game, I did a post on Jonnu because, he's from Philly. And that was the first time Arthur Smith, who is the OC, he was the tight ends coach at the time, but he said, hey, you waiting for my guy New? I was like, yes, sir. He's like, hey, man, I appreciate you writing about him, man. I love that guy. You know what I mean? So there's going to be a lot of plays being called for Jonnu because that's like Arthur Smith's, project. That's his trophy.
Looking forward to try to sneak him late in fantasy this year.
Hey, I'm getting him myself. Believe that.
Turron, jumping from one side of the ball to the other. On the defensive side, you got Dori Jackson this year, who has been pretty much kick return specialist, we can call him. After this season, he's making pretty much around $10.2 million. They can save all that by cutting him. Do you think that for this year, this is kind of like the year for him to stand out?
And you said for Dori Jackson?
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely the year for him to stand out. We actually just did a Zoom with him a few hours ago, and one of the things that I asked him about was being more mentally stable. That's something he told me at this time last year. He said that's what he wanted to work on, just not letting the outside noise get to him and just being the best him that he could be. And that's what he did. And he played really well down the stretch last season. And just going into this year with that level of confidence, I think it's going to be big for him. But in addition to that, Logan Ryan has been taken out of the picture. And this is a guy that was one of the best nickel corners in the league. So now there's a big gap there. They don't have a true pure nickel corner. So Dori Jackson, he could now get more into that role, which would be shared with Christian Fulton as well and Amani Hooker, the second-year safety. But it's going to be a bigger opportunity for Dori to show. And you go back to the Chiefs game, Week 10, he actually turned and ran with Tyreek Hill on a couple plays and broke a pass up. Now, he did get cooked by Tyreek Hill, but, I mean, look, Tyreek Hill will cook Jesus if he lines up against him. So it's going to happen.
Dori Jackson at USC was special, and I love that whole USC team. I was a big Ronald Jones guy, Sam Darnold, and a Dori Jackson just returning kicks and everything. And he kind of reminds me of a guy that's in the same situation, kind of like Sidney Jones is in Philadelphia, where they're a guy that have to kind of just step up. Both of them have supreme talent. I know we probably mentioned that. It kind of sounds like we're overusing that term this podcast, but these guys like seriously have supreme talent. The Dori Jackson, like you said, can run with all of them. It's just like you said, it's maybe the mental aspect of playing in those type of markets and just kind of getting everything focused in.
Yeah, and I think with both of them, I mean, more with Sidney, that Achilles. I mean, when coming out, I thought I had him rated above Marshawn Lattimore. You know, as far as when you talk about corners. I saw Sidney Jones play live, and I loved his ball skills. I loved his click and close ability. That dude just created turnovers, you know. Change of direction was ridiculous. So he's had his injuries. And Dori has had some stuff with his foot that has hurt him too. I'm not making excuses because they need to play better, just point blank. But, I mean, I think these things actually contributed to that, and it's going to be fun watching these guys this year.
Definitely. I'm glad you brought up Sidney Jones, Zach, because I actually wrote yesterday, I think you guys saw it, I said that Sidney Jones, in my opinion, is poised for a breakout year this year, not only because I feel like he's finally going to be over the Achilles and the little nagging injuries that have caused setbacks, but like you said, Dori Jackson's going to have to take on a bigger role with Logan Ryan leaving. I think the addition of Darius Slay is the best thing that ever happened to Sidney Jones because Darius is the type of corner who's going to follow every team's number one every week. I feel like that takes immense pressure off of Sidney Jones' shoulders to try to go out there and be the guy. He can just be a guy now and do his role.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And even further than that, every day in practice, you get to see how a true clamps type of corner operates, right? So that's something that he could – and then even just competing against each other, right? You know, it's just a thing when athletes, you know, and I'm sure you guys know, it's just when you're going next to somebody, it's like, yo, I want to be better than him. You know what I mean? And he's like, oh, I want to be better than you. And that's just together going to push you guys to play even better.
Absolutely.
That's like those backfield relationships. And one of my favorite backfields of all time was back in the day was at USC. This is like the perfect like Robin to everybody was Lendell White. It's a name vault right there, Lendell White, who used to play with Reggie Bush, and then he went to Tennessee and played with Chris Johnson as well. So it's the type of relationship you saw with the Super Bowl Eagles as well. You had Corey Clement as a rookie catching touchdowns in the back of the end zone as an undrafted rookie, and it was practically a whole committee. So that's the type of relationship that a lot of running backs share.
No doubt. No doubt. Corey Clement, that's right. He's back too. So that's going to be fun watching. But
he grew up 10 minutes away from me. I've been watching Corey forever. So
yeah, he's a tough runner.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad to see him back getting another chance. Obviously, we talked about the Titans draft. There was a lot of controversy around the Eagles draft, particularly day 2. What was your thoughts on the Eagles draft as a whole?
You know, the Jalen Trager pick, I think, was solid. A lot of people wanted Justin Jefferson, but in my opinion, Jefferson is more of a pure slot guy, so I don't know if that would have been the best situation for them. He's a burner, right? And then they came back, they got Hightower. They signed, I believe it was a receiver out of Morgan. They got nothing but speed, and then trading for a good one was definitely solid for them. Obviously, the pick to talk about is, you know, Jalen Hurts, and, you know, I get it. Carson Wentz is the guy, but I think if anyone should understand the value of a backup quarterback, it should be Eagles fans, and it should be that
Absolutely.
Eagles organization.
True.
You
Yeah.
know, let's just say they had whoever backup quarterback in 2017, and that's not no slight on Nate Sudfeld at all, but let's just say they didn't have Nick Foles. Did they go to the Super Bowl and win it? I don't think so. You look at last year, that Eagles team, Carson Wentz did a lot with a little, right? And
Right.
The concussion that he got, McCown came in and did everything he could. But what if they had Nick Foles? The year before, Carson went down. Nick Foles came in and, they were able to maintain a high level of play. They got into the divisional game against the Saints, and, we know what happened there. So I just say all that to say I think this position, backup quarterback, I think it's been underrated in Philadelphia, and it's a position that you have to treat almost like a starter. So getting Jalen Hurts, I think, was solid for them. But then, not to mention, you can still package some things. Now, Jalen Hurts isn't Taysom Hill. He's a better quarterback than Taysom Hill, but he's not the same type of weapon that Taysom Hill is. But you could do some of those, and Dan Orlovsky, actually, my guy, we used to do CSN together a lot, but he drew up a couple nice plays on how they could, pass out of the read option with either guy. So I think it's a good package. Doug Peterson does a good job of packaging things for guys. So I think it was a solid pick.
Yeah, there was a lot of great. I mean, personally myself at the time, I was kind of losing my mind because I was just looking at guys like Denzel Mims, AJ Epinesa still on the board, guys that I thought could have came in and made an immediate impact at positions in need for this team. But then after getting to sit back and think about it, I think it's actually going to be huge for this Eagles offense, not so much in the fact that what he's going to bring to the table as a quarterback year one, but I just feel like the past couple seasons, the Eagles offense has kind of looked vanilla and like just plain and simple, no real like mixing it up. And I just feel like adding all this speed and then being able to throw in a guy like Jalen Hurts is just going to make the Eagles offense that much more difficult to prepare for.
Yeah, I think that's the key is you want to just have as many ways to score points as possible. And you look at the way this game is being geared, it's more in the direction of points. When it's like back in the day, right? You say chicks dig the long ball in baseball, right? All you wanted was home runs, and you just wanted runs being scored. And all people want now is points being scored. So I think if you could find a way to incorporate this guy, and I'll tell you this much because I've dealt with Jalen Hurts personally on a one-to-one level. That kid is an awesome leader. He's a guy that is going to be great for that locker room. I think he's going to help Carson raise his game. I think it's a great pick for them. So there are multiple things that will be of benefit to the Eagles by adding Jalen Hurts.
We talked a little bit about the Carson Wentz injury. Specifically, I want to talk about Jadeveon Clowney, a guy that was rumored to Philadelphia and Tennessee. Tennessee signed Vic Beasley, who after 2016 had that 15.5 sack leader in the NFL year, has really dropped off, but he still has some talent. He's still young. What do you think the likeliness that Tennessee or even Philadelphia even brings Jadeveon Clowney in?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I know there's interest, and they've talked. Obviously, Clowney, he had his best season as a pro with Vrabel as his DC, so that definitely adds to the situation. I think right now, I would probably say the Titans are the favorite, but, I mean, that's like, picking the prettiest pig. There's no telling where this guy's going to go. The rumors are all over the place, but I know when you look at just the way this situation is right now, as far as not being able to have mini camp, OTAs, of course, there's a chance it could start next month. My prayers will be answered if it does, but at the same time, it's not likely. So you have to go to the situation that you're most familiar with. The Seahawks, they've moved on. The situation that he's most familiar with is with the Titans. And that's the thing that really puts me on the. I think he's coming to the Titans train, so to speak. But there's no telling. There really isn't. It's bizarre.
If
Absolutely.
he goes to the Titans, then he gets to play his old buddy Bill O'Brien's team twice a year, and I'd love to see him get some revenge on the Texans. That'd be interesting. But Turron, do you just because of like some rumors that go around about how Clowney is and how he acts, and maybe there's some character concerns, do you think he would fit in all right in the Tennessee locker room?
Oh, without a doubt, he would fit in all right. The locker room there is very mature. There's a lot of veterans that, well, there aren't as many veterans, come to think of it. When you got guys like Wesley Woodyard, Jarrell Casey, Logan Ryan, who have moved on, Delaney Walker, et cetera. But I still think the foundation has been set. So I don't think there would be an issue. One of the things that is going underrated is the signing of Jonathan Joseph, who has been in the league for a long time. Yeah. And he's actually Jadeveon Clowney's one of his best friends. So I don't think there would be an issue. The other thing you have to look at is Clowney and Mike Vrabel have an awesome relationship. No one's really talking about Shane Bowen, the outside linebackers coach, who actually coached Clowney in Houston. And then you have the DB coach, Coach Midget. Anthony Midget was there, when Clowney was in Houston too. Not to say that the DB coach and a defensive lineman deal with each other a lot, but there's still that level of familiarity, So I don't think it would be a problem at all.
For sure, yeah. It definitely seems like that would be his most familiar situation would be Tennessee with all the coaches who we previously had. Do you think it's more so, I don't want to say like the quarantine has had anything to do with players still being available, although I think it may play a little bit of a part. Do you think so it's more so a personal reason, or it's just teams showing lack of interest in why you see guys like Jadeveon Clowney, Everson Griffin, Devontae Freeman, Cam Newton all still out there?
Yeah, it's unexplainable because Logan Ryan is out there too. And yeah. He had a really good year last year. So, there are flaws in all those guys, right? There's definitely question marks with all of them, including Logan Ryan. But I think the quarantine has played a big role, and just free agency was just different, right? It was a lot different than other years, just because when have you seen the top option on the market last all the way to June? You haven't seen that. So I can't say that the quarantine didn't have anything to do with that, man. I just can't. But at the same time, Clowney is unique because if you're a guy who puts stock in sacks only, you know what? You might not be willing to pay $17 million a year for Clowney. But if you're someone who looks at more than just that and just the impact that another player can get from him being on the field, then you'll be more warranted to pay that money. But it's a strange situation, even beyond just quarantine. Just when you look at Clowney himself, it's different. He makes plays beyond the line of scrimmage though, and that's something that's key.
Yeah, for Clowney, something that was always my issue with him was when you try and make him that number one overall pick and that number one guy in a defense and put that pressure on him, he doesn't really perform. But if you can add him to the Eagles defense or the Tennessee defense that's already established and he can't get double teamed, then it's an absolute nightmare. And a game that I like to talk about is Nate Sudfeld got in for one play in the Tennessee game. I think it was week 16, 2018, because Clowney on the 2-point play earlier in the second or the first half completely, I think everybody remembers that play where he almost ripped Nick Foles' head off, and then he hit him again late in the fourth quarter and put him out. So when Clowney gets that Hulk mean streak in him, and like I said, he's not the number one guy. He's got a guy like J.J. Watt or those big guys that Houston used to have as nose guards, swallowing blocks inside, and he can just focus on the edge. He's a nightmare.
Yeah, he really is. And he's someone really good on stunts. You can move him all over the place too. Ironically, he's a guy that you can put inside and let him play 3-tech and on occasion. I'm not saying consistently. So he's a good piece to have.
For sure. Now, Turron, just one last question before we let you go. I don't want to hold you all night on a Friday night.
No, it's all good.
But Do you think we're going to get football on time this year? And if so, will there be fans?
Yeah, I think we are going to get football. I think we are. I think we'll get it on time. As far as the fans, that's really the major question. I don't know about that part of it because at this point, how can you have all those people together, in one place and it be safe? So I'm going to say probably not on time, maybe at some point, but this is unprecedented. So anyone that sits here and tells you that they know what it's going to be, they're telling you a story, and don't trust them.
Absolutely. I live here in Tampa now, and this is where the Super Bowl is at this year. So I'm kind of like, obviously, I want to be able to go to football games and go and experience the atmosphere and stuff. But then I'm also like, this town's probably going to be chaotic if fans are allowed to go to the Super Bowl. So maybe this quarantine lasts until February. It won't be that bad.
Yeah. Well, I may be in Tampa. The Titans have a preseason game with the Bucs. So, yeah, hopefully everything works out and I could come down there and go to a game, cover it.
For sure. All right, Turron, I want to thank you for joining us, obviously. Taking time out of your Friday night. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate you guys, man. I love football. I love to talk about it. So this gave me a good break from, just the everyday life. Not that it's bad for me at all, but, it was good to get back in the saddle and talk some shop. I appreciate it.
Yes,
sir. Appreciate you,
No
Turron.
problem. Hey guys, make sure you go out there and you follow Turron on Twitter at @Davenport_NFL. He's one of us, man. He's a Philly guy, always bringing the great stories. Now covering Tennessee, so make sure you give him a follow.
absolutely. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Turron, again, thank you again, and I hope you and your family stay safe.
No problem. You guys take care, man. Appreciate it.
Sir, salute. Have a good day.
Thanks, Turron.